Welcome to Building Healthy Relationships, the 4 Habits podcast, helping you enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Andrea and Jon Taylor-Cummings, recognized authorities on the subjects of improving work relationships and cultures, as well as couple and home relationships.
Well, hello and welcome to our audience. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is in your time zone. It's a joy to have you with us. Today, we are delighted to be in conversation with Charlie Wagstaff. Charlie, thank you for making the time to join us today.
Pleasure, a real pleasure. And hi to you and hi to everyone else who happens to be listening. Great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And we need to give you due credit. To help our audience understand the wonderful experience and caliber of person we're in conversation with today, John's going to take us through the bio.
Always my pleasure and privilege. Okay, so Charlie Wagstaff is a leading authority in leadership development and organizational strategy. As the co-founder and managing director of Criticaleye, he spearheads a global network dedicated to helping senior executives and boards navigate complex business challenges through peer-to-peer learning and mentoring. With operations in London and Hong Kong, Charlie's work focuses on building resilient, high-performing leadership teams. Love these kind of conversations. And
it's so in sync, the synergy already, but we'll
absolutely. So throughout his career, Charlie has held pivotal roles, including overseeing operations and HR across sub-Saharan Africa for CDC Capital Partners and driving international management development initiatives at Chorus Tata. These experiences have established him as a leader skilled at integrating strategic goals with human-centric solutions. Again, so much language that resonates with us. We're so excited about this.
On that one as well.
Absolutely.
Human-centric solutions.
Charlie holds an MSc in Strategic Human Resources Management from London South Bank University, and today he serves as a board advisor at Portsmouth University, facilitating key discussions on leadership dynamics and digital transformation. A passionate advocate for adaptability and relational leadership, Charlie is committed to helping organizations thrive by fostering trust and shared purpose. Now, having lived overseas in Africa and now operating across Asia, he benefits greatly from integrating diverse perspectives and implementing impactful outcomes. Charlie is guided by 3 pursuits. Am I growing? Am I enabling? Am I having fun? Love those 3.
I think that's exactly where we're going to start. Am I growing? Am I enabling? And am I having fun? Charlie, what's the backstory to the work that you do now, where you've landed with the questions to challenge us all? Am I growing? Am I enabling? Am I having fun? How did you get there?
How did I get there? Thank you very much indeed to you both. How did I get there? I think it was nothing that I planned.
Famous story.
I'm sure you'll have heard that a number of times. I suppose I was driven, and then that enabled me to open doors. And I think that I think school was very influential. It does make you who and what you are. But it's not just school, it's the environment with which your family supports you or challenges you, and they can do both. My parents divorced when I was 13. That meant that the support I had to extend to my mother and to my younger brother was one that I was not necessarily ready to step up for, but found I had to step up for in some way, shape or form. I moved a lot around. I was born in near Manchester, north of the UK. We moved around the country quite a lot, and that meant that you had to adapt to the different schools that you found yourselves with and people's perceptions of you. And what you needed to do is very quickly and intuitively as you could read the room and decide how you were going to respond to the environment you found yourself in. You also got immediate feedback in terms of the perception people had of you. And you had to deal with that in terms of, was that something I wanted to feel I need to ingratiate myself towards, or was it something that I wished to stand apart from a little bit and just work out my own path?
Right.
I chose the latter rather than the former, and probably in the knowledge that I was going to have to move again in another short period of time as well. I think you have to work out, you have to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
And by being true to yourself, you've got to work out who is that self, of course.
Yeah.
And there are many ways that all those things that you have are challenged. And many of those things you have to work out through supporting, aligning yourself with certain people and finding that the alignment might not be quite right.
Mm-hmm.
But also you have to work out where your inner core is, and if you're going to protect, and how to protect yourself in so doing. And all those things, to be honest, I think have then continued as I've taken my career forward, as I've made certain decisions, and how I respond to other people around me.
Yeah.
And so coming back to that statement that I said, which is about, am I growing? I've always been curious. And I'm not quite sure why. I think it's probably something that's you're born with that to some extent. Am I enabling? Am I adding value in the pursuits, in the people that I'm engaging with? Am I having fun? Am I enjoying it simply? And do I feel comfortable in that environment? How do you find that place? So those three pursuits have been consistent probably from my childhood right up to what I'm doing now, which is having set up a business 22 years ago with two guys. To be honest, we were extremely naive. I think there's a wonderful thing about naivety.
You think you can conquer the world when you start your own business? Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah, you think you can do anything, and you think it's going to be very easy to get there.
Yeah.
And then when you hit a barrier, then you go, hold on a moment, I'm going to need to go not against it, but around it, or navigate my way around it such that I get to the destination that I'm seeking to get to. And so therefore you get to say, am I growing? Am I enabling? Am I having fun throughout everything you're trying to do? So as an HR practitioner, it enabled me to see other industries, to see many people in the way they perceive the world. And I was fortunate to be working for companies that were international, were global, that I loved and I got fired up by, and it brought something to me. And then it came an opportunity where I realized as I became more and more commercial as an HR practitioner, where I became more frontline, that I suddenly thought I quite like exercising more control over my destiny.
Yeah.
I think you have to decide that fundamentally at some stage in your life. Can I find someone who I can trust my identity and destiny with? And you're lucky if I think you can find someone.
Indeed, especially now.
Exactly. Or do you set your own destiny as much as you can? And so I realized after working for three very distinct organizations where there were some real challenges, that I'd quite like to set my own path.
Yeah.
That, by the way, has its own risks.
We're with you.
Yep.
Risks is one way to put it.
Been down that road.
I love the way that you're clearly a very reflective person, and you've made this very strong link with the challenges you had as a young teenager, the ways you had to step up for your brother, for your mom, even for yourself, and how that's helped you to be, from the way you've described it, very intentional about the relationships, the experiences, the things you've taken on and not taken on, and the way you described being true to yourself, but first needing to know who that self is. And I just wonder, I wonder, my sense is that especially now post-COVID, a lot of grown-ups are asking that question, who is this self? What have you found? What are you finding in your work, working with senior executives and CEOs? Do they know, is there a sense of this self, or are people needing to find it or re-find it now?
Great question. I think definitely COVID, you inevitably were limited in terms of what you had to think about. That therefore gave you the opportunity to think about something differently. And many people went through a observation of what they began to enjoy that they suddenly saw was going to be taken away from them post-COVID. and invariably you were locked up with your family. For some people that was great, for other people that was a worst nightmare.
Yep.
And they worked out pretty quickly what they needed to do afterwards. For those who enjoyed that family and benefited and felt that they could revisit things that they might have omitted to have done earlier in their lives, the energy and to some extent the financial position they found themselves in, they felt they could review and distance themselves from the working environment to go into something different. I always used to get shocked when someone would say, as they transitioned from being in their executive to their plural career or then their next phase, them saying to me, I can now do something I really want to do. Which begs the question, what the hell were you doing
Before?
career?
Yeah.
And that was very worrying and troublesome. And so therefore I think people should try and align themselves as much as they can to who and what they are and take a few risks in life. Because when you look at it, the risks aren't quite as great as you think they are. And I think it's knowing that you're stronger and more capable than you think. You have greater friendships in place that you can test and then determine what the true friendship is. But financial wealth is important, but it's not might be as great as perhaps other elements of wealth that you should consider, or perhaps more important, that might mean it brings something out of you that is for the better, for you and your family and the communities that you serve. And I think the sooner you can realize that, the better.
So I'm thinking back to what you've been saying all along here. There's a lot of alignment conversation. You need to align, you need to find your inner core, etc. How do you do that? How do people do that other than just reflecting? Is it just a general reflecting, or what are practical things people can actually do to say, this is me? Now I get it. This is me. How do they do that?
Yeah, I was going to ask that question differently, saying, does it take a crisis? Is it a crisis that will bring people to that point?
So often it is a crisis. So when I set up Criticaleye, there was a crisis in as much as my role finished, I was redundant, and therefore what do I do next? And I often sit with people who come out of redundancy. The time you can't tell them, but you know what? They're going to go to somewhere better.
Yeah.
In the majority, about 95% of those, they go on to something better. So therefore, the crisis, the burning platform, has created an opportunity for them. In terms of your question about how do you align, I think you do have to listen to yourself and also know yourself, but also trust yourself. And I think it helps if you do have a good family unit around you. But you know what? Many people don't. And some people come out of those scenarios very well, other people less so.
Yeah.
I think there is a certain amount of responsibility you have to take for yourself because no one else is going to. The only person who's going to make you who and what you are, the only person who's going to support you is you. The sooner you realize that, the better. And then it's what you make of yourself. And by the way, that's not a bad thing, but don't rely on others. Don't lean on others, because when the buck stops, you're the one that I think has really got to pick yourself up and go forward. And many people we see in dreadful situations who realize that and become amazing individuals.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny you say that about families, because we're blessed and fortunate to have a great family support network. So for me, family is quite a positive thing. And I was talking to a guy about a team we'd been working with who were just so gel. They were really great team delivering outstanding results. And my takeaway from having a conversation with them is they felt like family. And I was sharing that with somebody else. And he's like, no, for me, family is not a good thing. My experience of family is actually quite a bad thing. So I've had to change my language to say, actually, they felt like a healthy family, because then I guess we're clear what we're talking about. But we cannot just assume that family is a positive thing. And to your point, you can't make those assumptions. Trust in yourself. And if you're blessed to have a great family, then okay, fine, you can lean on that as well. But you can't just assume that it's going to be there.
So do you have a story that you could share with us, Charlie, of somebody who maybe might not have been aligned, maybe didn't know their true self that was crying out to be expressed in a more meaningful and aligned way, that you helped
on that journey.
on that journey, you worked with them, and the results that came from that?
Many, and it's a difficult one to know, to pick one that's going to resonate with people, but I think everyone around you is going through some crises. Understanding that the actions you see before you, there is something deep rooted behind it. So I think it's always important to try and connect with that and then respond in the way that you think is appropriate. So I was working as a HR director with two other people, a CEO and a CFO, and in a very tough environment, and one that required exacting. We were dealing with an environment that required us to make quite a lot of changes that had a big impact upon thousands of people, and the responsibility of that is great.
As the lives you're impacting now.
Well, when you say changes, so we're talking redundancies then.
Yeah.
So it's lives, it's families, it's real stuff.
And a massive transformations in the way that people were working and operating, and one that was difficult sometimes to be able to communicate because of distance. But the three of us had to operate consistently, and we might not have liked everything that we were doing, but could see the longer term end game and what it might mean. And yes, it would have been something that we, if we could have done, if we were involved early enough, we might have been able to have a solution that was going to be better. Things needed to be done. For the CFO, this proved to be very problematic for them, and therefore caused a real breakdown in the relationship between them and the CEO. And this caused them also great distress, and was something they were not able to fulfill. And that wasn't managed as well as it could have been. And it's then what you do as a team of three to be able to try and bring those two people together. But it's also remembering that I myself was going through my own challenges of having to get there. Who do you look after first? It's no different to the advice we're given when we're on an aeroplane, when the mask drops down. You first of all look after yourself before looking after others.
To be able to,
I had to do that. And then did I not do enough? That's where the challenge. Did I not do enough to support that other individual? I don't know. But at the end of the day, I do know that I had certain responsibilities to myself, my family, and to what we needed to achieve, and I took a certain path. Ultimately, we were able to get there. Ultimately, I had required to do things differently to respond to that situation, and it wasn't easy. But it did mean we came out with, I think, a very good result. It did mean that the CFO felt they needed to move on. And I would like them to be able to continue with us, but that was not going to materialize. So I think that's when you've got to make certain decisions, and you've got to stick with it, and you've got to see it through. And I think when I look at it, overall, the benefit was such that we're able to achieve what needed to be done in the time that we were set, and with the least fallout possible.
So what were some of the practical things that you did for yourself? Because you'll know what your journey the best. What were you able to do for yourself? What were the notes to self that allowed you to take that stance?
I needed to understand the CEO I was working with and the way that they operated, and then I think in life it's about filling the gaps. What do I mean by that? You observe what's going on and what the overall plan is, and then where are the deficiencies? Where are things not working? And then you do what you have to do, but also you fill the gaps. And that way, then there's a complete solution. So it might be that you have to do something that might be under you. It might be you have to engage in a different way. It's not on the JD. It's not on the job outline. But it means that the end game is achieved and everyone wins.
So going above and beyond, basically.
Yeah, it is above and beyond. Every time you have to go. So you've got to align yourself and therefore you've got to peripherally look to see what's going on. With this team of 3, what did I do? I made quite sure I got to know the CEO very well and their family.
Mm-hmm.
I realised the family to them was very important, and I became part of the family.
Mm.
And I made quite sure I put in the hours.
Mm.
And there were a lot of hours that I put in. I pulled in my family into the process as well, because I need to understand what was it that made the individual tick. And actually, I realised they were human. They were under severe pressure, and they had their own anxieties. And once I could relate to that, then I could better understand what they're trying to achieve, or at least understand they were human.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we want to see people that they are human.
And I love the way you described how you align, of course, with where they are and what their values are, but how do you link that to your own set of values? You know, sometimes making redundancies can cut across some of the things you would prefer to not have to do, or, you know, values that you hold dear. When you're going through a major transformation like this as part of the C-suite, how do you hold yourself aligned even when you have tough decisions to make?
I think at the end of the day, you've got to look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture was the business must continue to exist, hopefully. Mm-hmm. And so that was what sustainability used to mean, was the sustainability of the business.
Yeah.
And there would be a number of people, unfortunately, who were going to be affected. Could you then cushion the position they found themselves in? Could you then support them make that transition? And interestingly, a lot of organizations do a lot of time positioning and doing that, but don't think about the people that are left behind, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
Who require a lot of work and need to be realigned. And they feel bad in themselves about what's going on to their peers around them. Why are they, to some extent, in the fortunate position of continuing the employment where their dear colleagues are not, and going through that dreadful process? So I think it's about understanding what's going on and what the bigger picture needs to be, and having the knowledge of having gone through this before in other places, knowing that these people who were going to be made redundant were actually fact they were going to have money behind them. They're probably going to pay off some of the bills that they needed to pay off, and they would secure a good job relatively quickly.
Yeah. So it's interesting that the example you gave is one that involved transformation and cutbacks with the very people that you're probably seeing a lot of now in your business with a Criticaleye, people going through redundancies and needing to make that pivot in life. How do you pick them up and turn them around then? These people who, especially the more senior ones who've been made redundant or having to
later
change
stages
careers.
of career,
How do you pick them up and redirect them with purpose?
I mean, one thing I would also like to say, I think organizations need to be better at managing this so that they know there's going to be challenges ahead. So therefore, how can the organization flex?
Yeah.
So a large part of what we're helping organizations do is build out capability that can mean at any point in time, the skill sets can be moved into a different area. And the people are able to cope and respond to that. So those people that are made redundant, many of them in actual fact are quite fortunate. There are many people who are not, but many of them are fortunate because they are skilled, and probably they needed to be moved on because they were not enjoying or finding what they were doing very fulfilling for them. They're going to be honest with themselves. So for many, this is quite a release. They're going, whoa. However, we're living longer. There are certain pressures put upon us societally to continue working, particularly when you're a senior executive. They are expected to take on interesting portfolio opportunities, and also intellectually they do need to continue to have that. They continue to have that need. It's something that's been part of their life. I mean, for some people, they've been working for 40 years. How do you suddenly switch that button off and then go in another completely different direction. So we tell them to plan. We tell people in their 40s to think about it, and they're definitely in their early 50s to think about it. And we encourage organisations to support them undertaking that. And that, by the way, makes them a better executive. So if they've got a non-executive or trustee position, working for a charity or any other organisation, it brings an insight to them about what's going on in the board and the dynamic of what stuff goes into that black box in the board and what comes out. If you're serving in an organisation in that capacity elsewhere, then suddenly you get to know how to present and to demand what you need from the board.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you saying is really advice to any senior level executive, somebody advanced in their career, whether they're at risk of redundancy or not. They should really be proactive about their career. Don't be sitting there on your haunches, be exploring other options, looking at any D-type roles, looking at other stuff out there.
Exactly, John. You've got to, this is the thing, you've got to constantly learn. Don't think you've got the degree, you've got the experience. That's going to be, if you've got the degree, by the way, you don't need to have it. But don't assume anything. And all that's coming at us now is I don't think any leaders at the moment have the ability to be able to cover all areas. So therefore it's understanding who you've got supporting you, who are you lifting up. As a leader, understand that you can find yourself in situations that you're going to feel distinctly uncomfortable in. And by the way, that's okay. But make quite sure you know where to reach to and where to go to in order to resolve the issue. AI is for many people an area that they feel uncomfortable with.
And yet it's coming.
It's arrived. I don't know about so we've got to tackle it. And whether, by the way, as do non-executive directors. But anyone in an organisation should be looking at that.
Yeah, indeed. I'm not sure if you've actually seen the 4 habits that we talk about, but I love that in your language you've already covered 3 of them. Because when we asked you about am I growing, you started with curiosity being just a natural part. A while ago you spoke about not assuming things, and before that you spoke about connecting with people. Before talking about, to understand where they're coming from and so on, before you have tough conversations. So I knew we would be very aligned in the way that we speak, and you're naturally, talking about the habits that we encourage.
The only habit we haven't touched on then is our, what we call habit 2, which is be careful, not crushing. And that really is all about in conflict situations, our experiences in conflict situations, most of us get selfish and we do what's right for us. Which doesn't necessarily is not necessarily the right thing for the relationship, for the long-term relationship. We do the selfish thing, and that can crush the relationship and leave the other person in a bad place and cause a break. Whereas, so conflict, we say conflict is inevitable, it's going to happen. It's how you handle the conflict that makes all the difference. Because handle it well, you can actually strengthen the relationship and be in a better place. Handle it badly, and the wheels can come off very quickly, and you end up going different routes. Is there anything in that space that you help some of your executives work on to improve the way they handle conflict and keep their careers on track or heading down a new track?
And I think what you're talking about is trust, fundamentally. So you can break trust down. You can break it very, very quickly. And so therefore, it's about how you make people feel. Building on that Maya Angelou great quote. It's something you just can't ignore. And what I would say is that I think we spoke a moment before we started this our forum. We spoke about home and about work. I think they're so integrated.
Indeed.
It's whether it's the observations we're fortunate enough to have children, in terms of the way that you bring them up and the way that you manage them, through to the relationship you have with your partner. And I mean, I learn a lot from my wife, and the way that she deals with me, and we protect each other in very different ways. she is extremely good at deflecting what I say. But she does it. But she doesn't absorb it, and sometimes I say things that I shouldn't. I'd rather I didn't, perhaps shouldn't say. But she deflects it, and then I think, yeah, okay, you're dealing with me in the way that I should be dealt with. But equally, the things that she says and does, more does, that I equally deflect. But there's such mutual respect. And one of the ways that we deal with things, in any decision we make, we only go with that decision if we both want to do it. And interestingly, I've noticed in other couples that necessarily isn't the case. So I've observed that for other people, it's about, I will have my decision and you can have your decision, and then they go off in different ways. No, I mean, I think both can work, but understand what both mean.
Indeed.
So by us saying that, so I might say I wanted to, or let's say there's a TV program. I say I might want to watch that, and she'll say no, and then she says I want to watch that, and I'll say no, and eventually we'll find something that we both to watch.
Yeah.
Unless we've given up, and they say, well, let's change tack and do something else. But that's the way we generally operate. And it does mean, therefore, that we're enjoying whatever it is we're sharing. And I think that is very, very important to be able to do that. I think to some extent you can do that in work. Not all times, because sometimes as a leader, there's certain decisions you've got to make. And there are certain occasions when you've just got to press go. But you might have hopefully explored a number of avenues before deciding that's the right thing to do. And I think there's a responsibility upon a leader to be able to do that and know when to do it. That I think is really, really important. There's a great, I think, something that says a great deal to me. I think people think the grass is greener elsewhere, but the grass is only green where you water it.
Indeed.
And it's a quote I came along some time ago. I think it's understanding that you have to put attention, time, energy, love, actually, into what you're trying to do. And that's where you water it, it will be green. Don't assume just because of what you perceive that elsewhere is going to be as you perceive it to be. Really understand it.
Or that elsewhere the grass became green on its own, because it doesn't. Somebody was intentional over there.
Exactly, Andrea.
And that ties in so beautifully with the way you described, your human-centric approach to fulfilling these strategic goals, and a relational approach to leadership, which is absolutely speaking our language. But I was going to say, is there anything that you wanted to share, that you would want to leave the audience with along that theme, relational leadership or a human-centric approach, that we've not touched on yet? And then...
Well, just before you jump into that, I was just going to say on the grass greener theme, even in teams, what we are, in our experience, certainly with the teams that we've worked with, the teams that have the best results, the leader has been going around watering individuals one by one. There's no sort of you don't just get the hose out and just water the whole thing. It's sort of individual watering for each one. I'm stretching the metaphor.
I thought you just get a fire hose.
Yeah, exactly. And blast it. Exactly. Individual water and care and attention is really what gets the best results. Where everybody feels like they've been watered according to what they need. They've had the right amount for themselves. I'm sort of stretching the analogy. I'm conscious, but yes. Any thoughts that you wanted to leave the audience with? I'm just conscious we're kind of up to time soon.
I don't know whether this has been said before, but for me, anyway, it's about keeping things simple. I think we complicate things too much, or we allow ourselves to be drawn in too much into something that is not relevant to really what needs to be focused on. And I think we will, as individuals, we continue to suffer if you have an emotional reaction to everything that is said to you. You need to sit back, and you do need to observe. And I think true enablement is understanding that restraint and reflection does work. And it's remembering that words control us. It's the way that we tend to generally communicate, which, by the way, means other people can control us. So it's understanding that relationship of what words mean. And so I did a team event, and someone in the team said something I thought was very useful. If you are an extrovert, pause for 6 seconds before you say something.
Mm-hmm.
If you're an introvert, say something before the 6 seconds come up. So I think it's about pushing yourself, but understanding also what you need to say and how it needs to be said is very, very important, because words are so significant. Keep it simple and remember what you're saying and what it might mean.
Beautiful.
I'm loving the 2 words you put in there as well, reflection and restraint. Key things to be able to do there. All of us take that time to reflect, but also restrain. Don't just do what comes naturally, because, as I say, that can be the selfish thing sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Put some thought into it. Don't be led by your emotions. I was making some little points as you were going here, some lovely little nuggets coming through.
And why I love the reflection and restraint is that sometimes, especially after we've not shown the restraint we need to, we need to reflect on that in order to do it differently next time. Otherwise, we stay in autopilot. So yes, that was beautifully said. So
I was trying to think of a title for this episode. Maybe a reflection and restraint could sneak in there somewhere.
Exactly. So we'll put some links and so on in the show notes, Charlie. But how do people, you're going to take the words out of my mouth, how do people find you, and what would they seek? What help would you be able to offer them? Just help crystallize that for the listeners.
So there is obviously the company that I'm a part of called criticaleye.com.
Mm-hmm.
Do look to see what there is there. By the way, for anyone, I think you don't have to be in the C-suite to be a leader. A leader is all around us.
Mm-hmm.
You lead at home, you lead in the street, you lead whatever one does. Understanding the responsibilities and the impacts that have and what you might need to deliver is something we should always be considering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically my go-to place. I'm on LinkedIn, of course. So
Mm-hmm.
do feel, if you want to reach out there, you can also see some other stuff I put out there. And that you might find helpful. And obviously always glad to have a conversation and to discuss this subject. The more we discuss it, the more we know and learn about one another. I think the better as individuals we become to be able to respond to situations in the right way.
Indeed. So is it individuals looking for like coaching and mentoring who would find you, or is it corporate teams, or is it both?
It's all of those, all of the above. I think we go to corporate organisations and we offer solutions for them to develop their senior leadership team. We also go to individuals, and also we help people transition into a plural career.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we have global reach, and we provide access to people to learn from, I was going to say the best, I think, for people who find themselves in situations that are both challenging and rewarding. And we get them to learn not just how it might have been done, but how it could have been done a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think there's a nice thing we're trying to get people to overcome. I think it's a quote from Franklin, who said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself."
Yeah.
It's understanding that. It really, really is. And I think there's a lot of fear at the moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there needs to be a sanctuary, a place where people feel they can be true to themselves and come out with solutions that can make them feel more comfortable with what they've got to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that we end pretty much where we started. Am I being true to myself?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And how can I be more aligned with who I know myself to be? And the 3 questions that you asked,
Exactly.
am I growing? Am I enabling? And am I having fun? So if the answer is no to any of those questions, it's time for a conversation with Charlie.
Oh, very kind. I'd be delighted to have the conversation, and equally delighted to have the conversation with yourselves. Thank you for asking those great questions and being part of your very successful journey as well. So thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure.
We always enjoy a great chat. And thank you for making the time to do this with us. So
yeah, it's a wrap.
I think from our side.
Huge thanks to you, Charlie. Thanks to the audience. Thanks for being with us yet again. And who knows who we're going to have in the hot seat next week. We look forward to it. I'm sure it's going to be great. But for now, it's bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, and you want to hear more, the best thing to do is subscribe. Then you'll never miss an episode. There's a new one every Friday. You can stay connected with us on social media at The 4 Habits for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and to participate in discussions related to the show. We always love to hear from you. And of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on your preferred platform to allow us to reach more listeners and help people around the globe radically transform the way they do relationships so they too can enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life.